At around 3 a.m. on December 22, 1939, 29-year-old William Joyce was driving along U.S. Highway 20, when without warning, a man suddenly stumbled onto the snow-covered highway directly in the path of his vehicle. Unable to avoid him, William's car collided with the man, sending him flying more than 40 feet down the road. William attempted to help the man, but after realizing the severity of his injuries, he instead quickly drove towards nearby South Bend, to seek help and look for a telephone to call police. When police arrived on scene, at around 3:30 a.m., they located the unconscious man by the side of the road. His injuries were consistent with being struck by a vehicle. He had multiple broken bones including his neck, he suffered internal bleeding and hemorrhaging, and severe trauma to his chest, legs, and torso. However, investigators also discovered the man's hands were bound, he was missing a shoe, and his eyes and mouth had been wrapped in several layers of 2-inch surgical tape. When the tape was removed, a handkerchief with lipstick stains was found lodged in the man's throat. The man was later identified as 44-year-old Stephen Melkey, a factory worker, widower, and father of 3, from Mishawaka, Indiana. Sadly, Stephen Melkey never regained consciousness and died of his injuries en route to St. Joseph Hospital. Evidence gathered at the scene painted an intriguing picture of what had happened to Stephen. Following Stephen's footprints in the snow, police determined he had been dropped off by a vehicle around 140 feet from where Stephen had been struck by William. The car then backed up before driving away. Stephen was initially bound at the ankles as well, but was able to free his right leg. He could not, however, untie his wrists, which were bound behind his back. Stephen then wandered aimlessly, in search of help. His footprints indicate he walked through a small wooded area, before turning and walking down a culvert, where he lost his shoe in the snow. There, it is believed Stephen sat down for a short period, before continuing to walk towards the highway. A second set of unidentified footprints were also found along the edge of the culvert, running directly adjacent to Stephen's path in the snow. Although the footprints were never conclusively linked to Stephen's case, investigators theorized it was possible his killer watched, lured, or even forced Stephen onto the highway. Detectives immediately went to Stephen's home located at 423 West Fairmount Avenue, in Mishawaka. There, they spoke to his 3 sons, Robert, 18, Leonard, 14, and Frederick, 8, all of whom were asleep when they arrived. The boys told police they had last seen their father shortly before they had gone to bed at 11 p.m. According to them, Stephen had spent the evening studying a home correspondence course, in the hopes of becoming a foreman at the Mishawaka Rubber Manufacturing Company where he was currently employed. A quick search of the home failed to produce any clues. Nothing appeared to be out of place or missing, and there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry into the home. When police first arrived, the front door was shut, leading them to theorize that Stephen was most likely lured from his home before being abducted. Police immediately brought several people in for questioning, starting with a 27-year-old local waitress named Bertie DeVos, and her soon-to-be husband, 28-year-old Alan Polomsky. Bertie worked for a local tavern called the Old Heidelberg. There, she became acquainted with Stephen, who was a frequent visitor of the establishment. Eventually, the two formed a friendly relationship. This did not sit well with Bertie's fiancé Alan, and on more than one occasion Stephen had gotten into several verbal altercations with him. Bertie and Alan were questioned, however both denied having any information about Stephen's abduction. According to them, they had spent most of the evening together out at a local bar. They claimed Alan dropped Bertie off at home around 3:30 a.m., and then he went home himself. They were released. However, a short time later they were brought in a second time for a lie detector test, which they both passed. Police also compared tire prints left at the scene to both vehicles belonging to Bertie and Alan, and neither were a match. The couple were again released. 41-year-old George Smith, a co-worker of Stephen's, was also brought in for questioning. According to several people, George was also quite fond of Bertie, and was seen several times arguing with Stephen at the tavern where she worked. However, like Bertie and Alan, after his vehicle's tires failed to prove to be a match, and he passed the lie detector test, he too was released. Although police continued to interview potential suspects, An arrest was never made, and the bizarre case known as the blindfold death of Stephen Melkey was never solved. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like and subscribe for more content just like this, and hit the bell icon, and we'll let you know every time we upload a new video. Thanks for watching.